After reading the intelligence reports, Luo Feng gained a clear understanding of both the public and hidden powers within Yulan City. He realized that even the city's elders depended on the three hall masters, showing how powerful they were. With hundreds of millions of cultivators and millions of divine emperors living in the city, only the strongest forces could share its enormous wealth. As a newcomer without influence, Luo Feng accepted that his only reliable path was hunting primordial life. Nevertheless, he remained confident in his future because the infinite space had already recognized his talent by granting him exceptional rewards. Since his illusion realm maze could safely store treasures, Luo Feng was not worried about theft and began purchasing cultivation materials. Although several million primordial crystals were a fortune for a newcomer, they were insignificant among divine emperors. Using his biomimetic eye of destruction, he carefully examined a leaf from the remains of a middle-stage divine emperor chaotic devourer. When he asked the merchant's attendant for the lowest price, the attendant explained that only bulk purchases qualified for discounts, 10% off purchases above 500,000 primordial crystals and 15% off purchases above 5 million. Luo Feng understood that his wealth was still too limited to negotiate special deals. He admitted that he could only afford the cheapest remains, such as scales and leaves, while valuable body parts like life cores were far beyond his budget because they were highly sought after for artifact forging and alchemy. After selecting his materials, Luo Feng purchased goods worth 520,000 primordial crystals, paying only 468,000 after the discount. He continued visiting every merchant in Yulan City over the course of a day, comparing prices and calculating the most efficient purchases. By the end, he had spent a total of 3.22 million primordial crystals and returned to his cave residence satisfied with his acquisitions. Back at the residence, Luo Feng met Di Fu and Emperor Ming. He told them that his first hunting expedition with Emperor Qing had gone smoothly. Emperor Ming envied him because he had joined a group of poor early-stage divine emperor bloodline cultivators who were still recruiting members and would likely need several epochs before their first hunt. Their goal was simply to cooperate in killing a single early-stage divine emperor low-level primordial life. Since they were poor and had little to steal, plundering groups generally ignored them, especially because they might have powerful backers. Di Fu happily announced that he had finally secured a position at the Nine-Ringed World Tower after passing its entrance examination. Luo Feng congratulated him, knowing it was one of the finest places in Yulan City for studying formations. Di Fu explained that Emperor Qing's intelligence and the inheritance knowledge he purchased from the True Witch sect had enabled him to pass the test. The master of the Nine-Ringed World Tower, one of Yulan City's elders, was among the city's greatest formation experts and was recognized as a practitioner of the True Witch sect, a branch of the Enlightenment Seeker tradition. Soon afterward, Emperor Qing informed Luo Feng that he intended to enter closed-door cultivation for 200 to 300 epochs before hunting again. Luo Feng decided to do the same, believing every hunt was a life-and-death gamble that required time to absorb the gains afterward. Emperor Qing, already at the middle stage of Divine Emperor, hoped to accumulate enough understanding to make further progress. As everyone went their separate ways, Emperor Qing into seclusion, Di Fu to work at the Nine-Ringed World Tower, and Emperor Ming to prepare with his hunting team, Luo Feng quietly boarded the official flying boat bound for the Holy Mountain. The fare was 1,000 primordial crystals per trip, much higher than what Emperor Qing had previously charged him. The official flying boat, which operated once every epoch, traveled through all 35 cities of the Nine Rivers Sacred Realm before reaching the Holy Mountain and then returned with new passengers. Private divine emperors were forbidden to transport passengers between the cities, though they could bring travelers back from the Holy Mountain for roughly 1/10 the official price, albeit with lower speed and safety. Luo Feng admired Emperor Qing's ability to pilot his own flying boat thanks to his mastery of spatial laws and formations, while acknowledging that his own expertise in the path of life and death was less suited for travel. Inside the enormous official flying boat, he found over 5,000 passengers, most of them divine emperors because weaker cultivators generally could not afford the fare. The flying boat was piloted by the late-stage divine emperor bloodline cultivator Lank Divine Emperor, whose powerful secret treasure allowed for exceptionally fast travel. As it passed through city after city over 2 days, Passengers continuously boarded and disembarked before it finally arrived at the Holy Mountain. More than half the passengers left the flying boat, while over 100 new travelers gathered near the deep pool at the mountain's base. After Lank Divine Emperor announced the transportation fees, Luo Feng ignored the boarding crowd and instead leapt directly into the deep pool. Beneath the water, he sensed countless spatial coordinates, locked onto the familiar coordinate of the land of origin, and was enveloped by a droplet that carried him rapidly out of the 9 rivers sacred realm. Traveling once more through the vast primordial space, Luo Feng watched enormous source worlds rush past and remained amazed by the incredible scenery despite having experienced it before. Eventually, the familiar land of origin appeared. The droplet entered the world and emerged within a secluded valley's deep pool in the Tianji icefield. Luo Feng flew out, pleased to have returned. This time only one of his avatars had come back, while his other avatars remained in Yulan City. Luo Feng was especially excited because he had brought back all the cultivation materials he had purchased. He believed studying the remains of low-level primordial life would be far more efficient in the land of origin, where he could combine the Eye of Life and Death with treasures from the infinite space treasury. Finally, after locking onto Huyang City from afar, he took a single step through space and instantly returned there. Inside the Star Tower, Luo Feng activated the Eye of Life and Death to study thousands of materials collected from low-level primordial life forms, including feathers, blood, bones, scales, membranes, branches, leaves, roots, liquids, and other unusual substances. He had purchased nearly every life and death-related material available from early-stage Divine Emperor creatures in Yulan City, over 5,000 samples costing about 300 primordial crystals each. Because he lacked the wealth to buy complete bloodlines or life cores, he instead gathered many different body parts from the same creatures, allowing him to study roughly 80 to 90% of their bloodline secret patterns through a cheaper approach. He also bought around 200 materials from mid-stage Divine Emperor creatures, only 10 from late-stage Divine Emperor creatures, and just a single bottle of blood from a perfect Divine Emperor-level primordial life due to their enormous cost. Luo Feng reflected that perfect Divine Emperor-level primordial life forms were extremely difficult to kill. Only the 3 Hall Masters of Yulan City had any chance of defeating one alone. And even they rarely acted because such creatures belonged to powerful tribes, were highly intelligent, and could lay deadly traps. While primordial life forms were generally weaker than cultivators in comprehension, they matched them in intelligence. Early-stage creatures were merely weak fringe members of their tribes, whereas perfect Divine Emperor-level beings were usually leaders or high-ranking members who fought together. This overwhelming tribal strength was the reason cultivators relied on fortified cities for survival rather than confronting primordial life armies directly. Luo Feng realized that gathering such a vast collection through hunting alone would have been nearly impossible. But the trading system of the 9 Rivers Sacred Realm made it easy. Although Yulan City sold inheritances, powerful weapons, and many cultivation resources, he spent nearly all his wealth on research materials instead. Trusting Senior Yuan's advice, he believed that creating his own path through studying all things was superior to relying on inheritances, since higher-level inheritances often restricted independent growth despite their value. Using the Eye of Life and Death inside the land of origin, Luo Feng discovered that his observation ability far exceeded what it could achieve in Yulan City. The same bottle of blood revealed over 10 times more secret pattern intricacies because the eye possessed observational abilities comparable to a high-level primordial life. He considered obtaining the eye one of his greatest investments, believing these thousands of materials would become the foundation of his future cultivation. Later, at Huyang City's City Lord's mansion, Luo Feng returned from closed-door cultivation and summoned Morosa, presenting him with a complete set of 8 early-stage Divine Emperor super-secret treasures perfectly suited to the destruction path, including armor, helmet, gloves, and formation diagrams. Morosa quickly refined them and was overjoyed, saying the set allowed him to glimpse the path beyond the godly king level. Although he admitted that understanding the path only made him realize how impossible a breakthrough currently was, he was confident the treasures would dramatically increase his combat strength, allowing him to suppress nearly every other expert in the land of origin aside from a few divine emperors. Luo Feng explained that the entire equipment set cost only 35,000 primordial crystals in Yulan City because early-stage Divine Emperor treasures were relatively inexpensive there. Altogether, he spent about 100,000 primordial crystals purchasing weapons and supporting treasures for Morosa. Blade River sect disciples, friends, and family. He intentionally bought only basic equipment because stronger treasures would exceed their current ability to use effectively. He also believed rewards should only be granted when someone earned them through merit or advancement. As for preparing gifts for his master, Emperor Chu, Luo Feng decided to postpone it until he became wealthier through more hunting. Believing his master could easily wait another 1,000 or 2,000 years. Having fully perfected his life and death Dao, Luo Feng entered infinite space at Lake Heart Island to demonstrate it. He effortlessly displayed his palm world technique, creating an enormous palm containing an entire world where he naturally executed ultimate realm forbidden techniques. At that moment, infinite space officially confirmed his breakthrough and informed him that he had pioneered a completely new great Dao based on life, death, and destruction. Because this great Dao surpassed ordinary great Daos in its foundation, it received the highest possible evaluation of perfect, earning him 200,000 reward points. His total reward points rose to 254,093.03, making him wealthy enough to exchange for multiple treasures comparable to the Eye of Life and Death, which had cost only 120,000 points. The message also stated that if his spiritual will someday escape the braided cage before he left it physically, he would receive the highest possible reward for spiritual will as well. Since infinite space had been established, fewer than 100 cultivators had achieved both the highest great Dao reward and the highest spiritual will reward. And over 70% of them had eventually escaped the braided cage. Luo Feng was encouraged by these statistics but recognized that escaping the braided cage with one's spiritual will was an extraordinary achievement, even among late-stage divine emperors, since his own spiritual will had not yet reached the divine emperor limit. He decided there was no need to rush and would continue cultivating step by step. Luo Feng reviewed the infinite space treasure vault and realized that his current ** 250.000 plus reward points * might be all he would ever earn, since he was still a divine emperor attempting to break free from the braided cage. Believing that far more valuable treasures would be needed after reaching the half-primordial level, he decided to save most of his points for the future and only purchase one affordable treasure now. He chose the * Undying Heart, costing * 43.000 reward points, because it was the only treasure under 100.000 points that perfectly suited both the * life * and * destruction * paths. The treasure possessed endless vitality, was nearly indestructible, strengthened the physical body, and could form an additional powerful war body. Unlike ordinary Divine Emperor secret treasures sold in Yulan City, the treasures in the Infinite Space Treasure Vault appeared to have been created by beings who had already broken free from the braided cage, making them far more valuable in the long term. After the exchange, Luo Feng had * 211.093.03 reward points * remaining. Back inside the Star Tower in the Land of Origin, Luo Feng examined the Undying Heart with his * Eye of Life and Death. He discovered that the green pearl contained incredibly profound secret patterns centered around a single drop of blood, which he judged to be blood from a * world-level primordial life form. This explained why the treasure possessed seemingly limitless vitality and was practically unbreakable at the Divine Emperor level. Luo Feng was extremely satisfied, believing the Undying Heart alone was worthy of studying until he eventually escaped the braided cage. Together with the Eye of Life and Death, it became one of the two most suitable treasures he had obtained from the infinite space. While browsing the treasure vault, Luo Feng also noticed many extraordinary cultivation treasures beyond his current budget. One was a miraculous sapling that would grow into a tree beneath which time-efficient cultivation and frequent enlightenment could occur. Another was the * Wisdom Book, capable of analyzing everything and assisting in comprehending the Great Tao, even surpassing the Eye of Life and Death. Although tempted, Luo Feng remained calm, recognizing that reward points were limited and had to be spent wisely. His current focus was to use the * Star Tower, Eye of Life and Death, and *undying heart* together to better understand the relationship between life and death. First learning how the two paths complemented each other before attempting true fusion. Using primordial crystals to replenish energy. Luo Feng devoted himself to studying countless materials from low-level primordial life forms. Thanks to the Eye of Life and Death, almost none of their mysteries remained hidden from him. Having collected nearly 90% of all early-stage Divine Emperor primordial life materials found in the Nine Rivers Sacred Realm, he could compare countless evolutionary possibilities of both the life and destruction paths. The enormous diversity shocked him. Initially, he dreamed of embracing every mystery and merging them into a perfect life and death Tao. But the sheer number of contradictory principles left him wondering whether such a complete fusion was even possible. Rather than becoming discouraged, he found this realization inspiring. The endless complexity meant there would always be greater heights to pursue. So he calmly resolved to advance one step at a time, carefully classifying secret patterns, studying each material, and absorbing only those suitable for his own Tao. Over the following epochs, Luo Feng's cultivation steadily advanced. His life path reached the early stage of Divine Emperor in the 105th epoch after returning to the land of origin. While his destruction path reached the same level in the 139th epoch through the ultimate destruction route. With both major paths complete, he slowed their individual cultivation and focused almost entirely on combining them into the great Tao of life and death. He regarded the life and destruction Taos as the roots nourishing the life and death Tao, meaning every future improvement had to serve the ultimate fusion. However, he discovered that achieving the early stage of Divine Emperor in the fused life and death Tao was at least 10 times harder than reaching the same level in either individual Tao. Even by the 269th epoch, he still had many unanswered questions and had not completed the breakthrough. Around this time, Emperor Qing invited Luo Feng on another hunting expedition. Luo Feng requested one additional epoch to prepare before accepting. Before leaving the land of origin, he deliberately left the valuable *undying heart* behind inside the Star Tower. Since he was still relatively weak, carrying such a precious treasure could attract unnecessary danger. He decided he would only use it once his strength approached that of a perfect Divine Emperor capable of matching low-level primordial life forms. At which point even the three Hall Masters would struggle to threaten him. Meanwhile, he took advantage of the land of origin's small universe to replenish his enormous energy reserves, equal to *390 times the energy of a perfect divine body, requiring nearly half an epoch before returning to Yulan City. Regular travel between the land of origin and the Nine Rivers Sacred Realm allowed him to transport cultivation materials for study while also bringing back vast quantities of stored energy, making the travel costs worthwhile. When Luo Feng and Emperor Qing began their second hunt, Emperor Qing was immediately astonished. During the first battle, Luo Feng effortlessly killed an early-stage Divine Emperor primordial life, displaying strength comparable to Emperor Qing using his formation diagram, believing Luo Feng had broken through to the middle stage of Divine Emperor. Emperor Qing was shocked because such progress normally required an extremely long time. Luo Feng explained that he had not advanced a major realm. Instead, both his life Tao and destruction Tao had independently reached the early stage of Divine Emperor, and their exceptionally refined combination produced strength comparable to an ordinary middle stage Divine Emperor. Since Luo Feng had spent so long researching the fusion of the two Taos, merely coordinating them in combat was naturally accomplished with remarkable precision. Realizing Luo Feng had now become the stronger member of the team, Emperor Qing suggested renegotiating the distribution of hunting rewards. Luo Feng modestly declined, pointing out that he possessed very few secret treasures besides his pair of gloves and that Emperor Qing's formation diagram compensated for some of the difference in cultivation. Emperor Qing accepted postponing the discussion until their next expedition but privately understood that Luo Feng's multiple avatars and mastery of both Taos already made his contribution significantly greater than his own. He also recognized that if Luo Feng continued growing stronger, they might eventually have to separate because the gap between them would become too large. The second hunting expedition proceeded far more smoothly than the first. They encountered no major dangers and successfully killed *9 early-stage Divine Emperor low-level primordial life forms. Emperor Qing explained that 9 kills represented the practical safety limit, since hunting beyond that point greatly increased the chance of attracting perfect-stage Divine Emperor primordial life forms. Trusting Emperor Qing's extensive experience despite his own greater strength, Luo Feng readily agreed to end the expedition and return, believing that the veteran hunter's judgment remained invaluable. After completing their second hunting expedition, Luo Feng and Emperor Qing loaded their spoils onto the black flying boat and began the journey back to Yulan City. Even while returning, they stayed alert, knowing that both primordial life and hostile cultivators could pose deadly threats outside the city. Hidden ahead of them, 3 experts had already set up a secret formation. Using its detection abilities, they discovered the approaching flying boat and decided not to attack immediately. Instead, they patiently waited for Luo Feng and Emperor Qing to fly deeper into the formation so the trap would be impossible to escape. Inside the flying boat, Luo Feng had his biomimetic Eye of Destruction activated. Since reaching the early Divine Emperor stage in both the paths of life and destruction, the eye had evolved further and gained much sharper perception. Although he could not detect any enemies or visible danger, he noticed that the operation of the surrounding heaven and earth rules was subtly distorted. A mysterious shadow power had blended into the natural laws, and the deeper they traveled, the stronger its influence became. Realizing that something was wrong, Luo Feng immediately warned Emperor Qing and ordered a full-speed retreat. Although Emperor Qing had sensed nothing unusual, he completely trusted Luo Feng's judgment and instantly reversed the flying boat. Their sudden retreat alerted the hidden ambushers, who realized they had been discovered. Without waiting any longer, they activated their trap. An enormous field of shadow power instantly descended, covering billions of kilometers and turning the entire region into a gloomy gray world. The dense shadow power was incredibly sticky and restrictive, greatly slowing the flying boat and threatening to imprison it within the formation. Fortunately, the flying boat had not traveled too deeply into the trap and was still relatively close to its boundary. Seeing the danger, Luo Feng immediately summoned his Heaven and Earth avatar and unleashed a newly created forbidden technique called Heaven and Earth Creation. Designed specifically after he reached the early Divine Emperor stage in both life and destruction, the technique perfectly matched the abilities of his avatar. Drawing upon the vast power of heaven and earth, the gigantic avatar swung its arm like a world-splitting axe. The strike tore open a colossal heavenly rift, as though the entire world had been cleaved in two. Even the powerful shadow domain was forcibly split apart, although only temporarily. Taking advantage of the opening, Emperor Qing drove the flying boat through the massive rift at top speed, instantly escaping beyond the range of the shadow domain. Luo Feng's Heaven and Earth avatar also followed through the gap before the shadow power could close again. Once they were outside the formation, Emperor Qing finally relaxed, realizing they had narrowly escaped being trapped. Emperor Qing immediately concluded that the attackers belonged to Shadow Tower. Luo Feng also acknowledged how formidable the formation was, noting that even his powerful forbidden technique had only been able to tear open a temporary gap rather than destroy it outright. Moments later, laughter echoed through the air as 3 twisted shadows descended before them and transformed into 3 cultivators dressed in gray robes and masks. An invisible pressure radiated from all 3, confirming their identities as members of Shadow Tower. Within Yulan City, 3 organizations regularly engaged in theft and robbery outside the city: Shadow Tower, Insect Nest, and Deceit Workshop. All 3 served under Wei Yang Palace Master, whose faction represented the strongest force in Yulan City. Among Shadow Tower's members, ordinary thieves held relatively low status, while those responsible for armed robbery were true middle and upper-level elites. These raiders always concealed both their appearance and aura because robbing cultivators naturally created countless enemies. Emperor Qing quietly warned Luo Feng that Shadow Tower raiders were generally at least mid-stage Divine Emperor experts. Only cultivators with sufficient strength dared to rob others openly. Luo Feng agreed, having already estimated their strength during the brief confrontation, and realized they were not opponents to underestimate. The leader of the 3 gray-robed cultivators laughed and addressed Emperor Qing and Luo Feng by name. He admitted that the 2 were indeed strong enough to hunt together, then asked whether they understood the usual rules of robbery. Emperor Qing calmly replied that they did and offered to compensate them with primordial crystals. However, the raiders refused money and instead demanded a single low-level primordial life corpse as the price for safe passage. After exchanging glances with Luo Feng, Emperor Qing accepted the demand without hesitation. He released the least valuable corpse among their hunting gains, worth approximately 800,000 primordial crystals. Satisfied with the payment, the 3 Shadow Tower raiders praised their cooperation, collected the corpse, and disappeared into the shadows without further conflict. After avoiding the formation, Luo Feng and Emperor Qing resumed their journey toward Yulan City. During the flight, Emperor Qing explained that hunting outside the city was dangerous not only because of primordial life but also because of other cultivators. Ordinary robbers could often be defeated or even killed and return. But elite raiders from organizations like Shadow Tower were much more dangerous. Whenever possible, it was wiser to flee or surrender some wealth rather than risk a life or death battle. Only if the raiders intended to kill for all of their treasures would they have no choice but to fight desperately. Luo Feng agreed with this assessment. Judging from the brief encounter, all 3 Shadow Tower raiders possessed strength comparable to mid-stage divine emperors and had likely accumulated many powerful secret treasures over countless years. Even with Emperor Qing fighting beside him, Luo Feng was not confident they could defeat all 3 opponents. After flying safely for some time, the black flying boat finally returned to Yulan City. Emperor Qing smiled with relief, considering their recent luck to be excellent. During their first hunt, they had survived an encounter with a late-stage divine emperor low-level primordial life. During their second hunt, they escaped a carefully prepared ambush by Shadow Tower and avoided another disaster by sacrificing only one relatively inexpensive primordial life corpse instead of risking their lives. Luo Feng remarked that their second hunt seemed ordinary, but Emperor Qing explained that they had actually been extremely fortunate. Hunting teams often suffered heavy losses after unexpectedly encountering powerful low-level primordial life or being ambushed by raiders on their return journey. Life in Yulan City was harsh for early-stage divine emperors, where even risking one's life did not guarantee safety from robbery. Fortunately, Emperor Qing possessed the clone technique from the land of origin, giving him a significant advantage. He added that Luo Feng was already as strong as a mid-stage divine emperor enlightened and only needed a few suitable secret treasures to become a core member of any major faction in Yulan City. Since elder-level experts were few, only 327 among the city's 723 late-stage divine emperor enlightened cultivators, many of whom spent their time exploring the dark sacred realm through avatars. The true backbone of the city's major factions consisted of mid-stage divine emperor enlightened cultivators. Although Emperor Qing suggested joining a faction, Luo Feng declined because his priority was advancing his life and death down to the early divine emperor stage. After returning to Primordial Hall, the two sold the remaining 8 low-level primordial life corpses and their battle merits for a total of 8.6 million primordial crystals. Dividing the proceeds equally, Luo Feng then spent an entire day visiting merchants, comparing prices, and bargaining before purchasing about 1,000 portions of mid-stage divine emperor low-level primordial life materials, each costing around 3.300 primordial crystals. These materials represented roughly 90% of all suitable resources available in the Nine Rivers Sacred Realm, while the rest were exceptionally rare. He also bought another 900.000 primordial crystals worth of cultivation elixirs and supporting resources. Soon afterward, an official flying boat was ready to depart, allowing one of Luo Feng's avatars to transport all the purchased treasures back to the land of origin using the Illusion Realm Maze storage treasure. Concerned about theft due to Yulan City's many unique cultivation systems, he considered this the safest approach, since cultivating in the land of origin with the Eye of Life and Death was over 10 times more efficient than in Yulan City. Luo Feng decided to continue traveling back after every few hunting trips until he became wealthier. Meanwhile, Emperor Ming learned of Luo Feng and Emperor Qing's safe return and reflected on his own disastrous hunting expedition. Unable to join regular hunting teams, he and 31 other early-stage Divine Emperor bloodline cultivators formed their own group. Despite carefully planning their tactics, they struggled to kill even the weakest early-stage Divine Emperor low-level primordial life. After executing 7 coordinated attack sequences, they severely wounded the creature but failed to finish it off. During its desperate counterattack, It killed 7 team members and seriously injured more than 10 others before the survivors fled. The failure convinced Emperor Ming that their strength was insufficient for hunting. So he resolved to focus on cultivation instead. Although he possessed considerable wealth from infinite space rewards, he dared not use it recklessly because he lacked the clone technique and was still too weak. At the same time, Di Fu continued working within the Nine-Ringed World Tower and greatly benefited from studying the true witch lineage's teachings on the Void Path. The knowledge deepened his understanding of space and brought him closer to mastering the complete space-grade Tao, which he believed would allow him to survive into the next era of the Land of Origin. Compared with remaining trapped at a bottleneck in the Land of Origin, Yulan City's diverse cultivation systems and abundant resources significantly increased his chances of breaking through. With Luo Feng and Emperor Qing taking care of his living arrangements, he felt fortunate to have come to Yulan City. Finally, Emperor Qing reflected that Luo Feng had already surpassed him in combat strength. Having remained stuck at his bottleneck for countless years, he decided to make a final gamble by selling many of his accumulated treasures to purchase the precious Void Heart Marrow liquid, worth 80 million primordial crystals. Determined to break through, he consumed the entire bowl of the rare liquid and began his breakthrough attempt. After more than 7 centuries in Yulan City, Luo Feng reflected that although his cultivation had advanced rapidly, his life and death Tao still had not reached the early Divine Emperor stage. Unlike his astonishing progress on the Land of Origin, where he had risen from an eternal true god capable of killing Di Yuan in only 5 centuries, merging the Tao of life and destruction proved vastly more difficult despite the help of treasures such as the Undying Heart, the Eye of Life and Death, the Star Tower, and countless studies of primordial life materials. During this time, however, he had accumulated profound insights and successfully created his greatest physical body technique, the Undying Blood Sea Body, inspired by the Star Tower's blood-colored scale and the mysteries of the Undying Heart. This technique gave him a physical body comparable to a mid-stage Divine Emperor low-level primordial life while leaving room for future improvements as his cultivation advanced. On their third hunting expedition, Luo Feng and Emperor Qing achieved their greatest success yet, killing 7 early-stage Divine Emperor primordial lives and even a mid-stage flame monster beast. Luo Feng fought the flame monster beast head-on with overwhelming physical strength, shrugging off its attacks with blood-colored scales that regenerated almost instantly while relentlessly tearing it apart. Emperor Qing only needed to support him with his sword array and deliver several finishing attacks. Witnessing Luo Feng's incredible growth, Emperor Qing admitted that although he had recently broken through to the middle Divine Emperor stage, Luo Feng had already surpassed him by a considerable margin and possessed strength comparable to the strongest middle-stage Divine Emperor experts. Feeling that his own contribution had been much smaller than expected, Emperor Qing voluntarily proposed changing their agreed 50-50 distribution of spoils to a 70-30 split in Luo Feng's favor, which Luo Feng accepted after understanding his sincerity. Emperor Qing privately marveled at Luo Feng's extraordinary talent, believing that while he himself might be 1 in 10,000 among cultivators, Luo Feng was more like 1 in 100 million and could one day rival late-stage Divine Emperor enlightened experts such as the ancestors of the 2 nations. As they returned toward Yulan City aboard their flying boat, Emperor Qing's enhanced mastery of the space-grade Tao allowed him to detect that they had unknowingly entered an extremely subtle void formation. He immediately warned Luo Feng and turned the flying boat around to escape at full speed, boosting it further with his sword array. Their pursuers revealed themselves by trapping them inside a vast painting-like secret treasure. But Luo Feng used a giant pair of life and death-infused hands to tear open the painting and free the flying boat. 5 middle-stage Divine Emperor cultivators from the notorious Deceit Workshop then appeared before them. Knowing the rules commonly followed by raiders, Emperor Qing politely suggested settling the matter by paying a fee in exchange for being allowed to leave. While some of the attackers favored following the customary rules, another leader argued that Luo Feng and Emperor Qing possessed valuable treasures from the source world and should be killed outright despite the risks. Greed won out, and the raiders abandoned all pretense of honor. Black rain filled the sky as the enormous painting secret treasure descended again to imprison them. Realizing there would be no negotiation, Emperor Qing prepared for a desperate battle while Luo Feng's eyes filled with killing intent. Calmly assessing the situation, Luo Feng declared that he would face 4 of the enemies himself, leaving only one opponent for Emperor Qing.